Welcome to the Leadership Upgrade Podcast. I'm Dr. Kevin, and this podcast we explore what it truly takes to become the kind of leader that people trust, respect, and want to follow. If you're a high achieving entrepreneur or executive and you want to upgrade your leadership from the inside out, this is the place for you. So, welcome. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes where we dive deep into conscious leadership, personal mastery, and building organizations that thrive. And if you want a full blueprint for upgrading your leadership, check out my new book, Lead Yourself First, The High Achiever's Guide to Upgrade Your Leadership. Grab a copy today by visiting upgradeyourleadership.com. Join the movement and upgrade your leadership. Now, let's get down to today's episode. Scott and I have been just chatting a little bit about his long, extensive career in many different forms of leadership until he ultimately jumped out of working for somebody else into creating his own business. So not only as a leadership trainer, but somebody who runs his own business is going to have a wealth of exciting ideas to share with us. Welcome, Scott. I'm excited to have you here.
I'm so grateful to be here and excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, right on. So out of the gate, I would love, one of the things I see that is kind of your rallying cry, this notion that when leaders see people differently, they lead people differently.
Yeah.
What on earth does that mean?
So as humans, when we see somebody, we automatically put a label on that person, and leaders are no different, right? So when we see an employee come into our office, we put a label on them, and often it's, oh, here comes my top performer, and we get really excited, or, oh, here comes my problem child. And the way we respond to that label is the way that we make that person feel. And it often then translates into what they start to believe about themselves. And that then translates into their behavior and their performance, and ultimately the results that we get as organizations. So what we challenge leaders to do is to recognize that the best way to dehumanize somebody is by putting a label on them, other than that which is priceless. So we try to remind leaders that every human being is priceless. And if we can remind ourselves that the person walking into our office is truly a priceless human being with inherent value and untapped potential, then we're going to start to treat them that way and make them feel that way. And hopefully they start to believe that about themselves. And that creates a whole different type of culture. That creates a whole different type of behaviors, and the outcomes they just start to go up.
Well, what if they truly are a problem child? I mean, heck, I was a problem child for all my organizations that I worked with. I mean, okay, that was just the reality. So how do you balance seeing reality versus that kind of beginner's mind I hear you talking about, where you're wiping the slate clean, you're not attached to a narrative or a tag about who the other person is, you're seeing them as they are, but what if they truly just aren't a fit? What if they're not doing what they need to do? How do you manage that?
So there are two things. One is I would challenge you that maybe that problem child that you have is a product of that environment, and maybe they've just given up, or they've been treated a certain way for so long that maybe you need to look under what I call, like, look under the water a little bit and see what's causing that behavior. But the big thing is just to separate that behavior from the person. And when we talk about servant leadership, which is what our organization is all about, it's not about not holding people accountable. It's not about not having those hard conversations, but it's about doing that with dignity. Because I think there's this crap that we fall into as leaders, that we feel like we have to hold people accountable with through fear and through toughness, but that ends up doing more damage than it does good. Or we don't want to hurt people's feelings, so we avoid it. And that doesn't do any good because we don't resolve the challenges. So we have to have those conversations. And that's why I say, remind yourself of the fact that that person is a human being who's deserving of respect and dignity. Have the conversation, make sure the expectations are clear, right? Let them know factually what you're seeing. And then it's about, what do you need to do to make sure that it gets done differently, better, and what ideally, what support as the leader you can provide that person to make sure they're successful. Because as a leader, that's your job, is to make sure that the people that work for you or that are entrusted into your care are successful. That's your number one job.
So, as a leader yourself with an organization, talk a little bit about, I mean, I love what you're saying, directionally right on, and we're humans.
Yeah.
And humans then have frustrations, have irritations, have perceptions we become attached to that will undermine our leadership. Can you tell us a story a little bit of how you discovered some of this and on
Yeah.
your pathway? Like, what was the biggest turning point for you when you realized that perhaps the way you were looking at things was getting in the way of the result you wanted to have?
So I'll share a couple of stories. One was early on in my career when before I even became a general manager of my first resort. I was a food and beverage director at a cool resort up in Newport, Rhode Island. And we had a GM that kind of led through that command and control style of leadership. And he was all about kind of leading through fear and truly believed that you needed to be tough and to even, he'd even coach us that you need to yell sometimes to motivate your staff. And I remember one of his favorite expressions was, "Don't let the inmates run the asylum." And it dawned on me one day that that's how he saw us. That's how he saw employees. We were inmates in this asylum. And it is how he made us feel. And we all walked around always so nervous. And like we would hear that he was coming and we would just like cockroaches, we would just go scatter and try to hide from this guy. And it was not a healthy work environment. And the turnover was so high in that environment. And so that was when I realized the way that you see people does dictate the way that you treat people. Now, as a leader of many, many people throughout my career, I've caught myself over and over and over again doing the same thing. And my biggest failures as I reflect back are times when I have forgotten to remind myself that the employee that I'm leading is priceless, right? So even the most recent corporate gig that I had an employee that wanted to spend a lot of time with me. She had a lot of great ideas and she was wanting to move up, but I had a lot of things going on and I was busy. And so I started to see her as this kind of like this time bandit or this time sucker, right?
Mhm,
And that's how I
mhm.
started. So I'd see her and I'd shut my door, or I'd be very short with her. And
Right.
and so she started to feel like she wasn't worthy or she wasn't valuable. And it really affected her. And she ended up leaving us with a really bad taste in her mouth. And I reflect back thinking, what was so important? Like all these meetings, all of these reports, I could have made time for that employee and made a much different experience, because that's the culture. When we talk about culture, culture is that lived experience that every employee has every day. It's not the big stuff that we put on the wall or in the employee orientation video. It really is those little things that happen throughout the course of the day that create the culture that people work in, which again yield the results that we get as leaders and as organizations.
I love what you're saying. It's like culture isn't what we say, it's
No.
what we do, and a
Yeah.
lived experience day to day. And I worked with an organization one time where the CEO was pounded his fist on the desk and said, "I'm the one who's going to determine how the culture is," and he didn't realize that he had said everything in that
Yeah.
action. It was all done, and everybody would just sat back and said, "Okay," and they stayed in their lanes and they just drove forward. Now, the thing is, that CEO had learned to move through the world in a certain way. I would suggest it went all the way back to the kind of when he developed his neurocircuitry and created, his downloaded his personality, so to speak. And I'm super curious what you've discovered about yourself, right? There's these patterns we develop as we come through the world. We learn how to survive and thrive in our early environment in a way, though, that our brain actually hardwires that in. And then it seems like to me, a lot of the work is unlearning or letting go of a lot of the stuff that we've learned, because what got you here is not what'll get you there. And I'm
Right.
curious if you found for yourself anything what else did you have to let go of? What else did you learn about yourself that you realized that even though it was the secret to your success, after a while, it started to undermine what you were trying to create? Now, just gave one great example. I'd love to hear another.
Yeah. No, I think I learned, and that's the whole journey. I'm you learn every day. I've always kind of prided myself in being able to motivate teams and motivate and being very positive and empathy and all those things. But one of the things that I learned along the way was that every person is so uniquely different. And that what motivates me, for example, isn't going to motivate everybody on the team. And so I would throw pizza parties when a team would reach a certain goal, like a guest satisfaction score for the
Mhm.
month. And I remember an employee coming up to me one time and saying, you know what, Scott, not everybody likes pizza. And it really took me back going, wait, I never even really thought of that. And recognizing that as a leader, yes, there's things that you have to do for the team to motivate the team and setting goals and having vision and things like that. But then the hardest part is learning about each person individually and recognizing that each person has their own strengths, their own weaknesses, their own goals. Some people want to grow, some people don't want to grow. And the way people like to communicate, the way people like to be recognized, that's challenging. But if you really want to create a team that's going to thrive and stay with you and give their all, that's the work that's got to get done. And to me, that was hard to learn, but it was one of the most valuable lessons that I learned along the way. And it's something that I try to teach leaders now, because you can't force people to be engaged in their job. You can't force them to give you that discretionary effort that is just so valuable, right? That moment where they're like wanting to give you these ideas or bring up these concerns that could potentially be very costly to the organization. That those things only happen when people truly feel seen and valued and respected. And that's the work that you got to do to get there.
Is there ever a time you can think of when you worked in an organization where you didn't feel that? And what was the impact?
Yeah, I mean that one place I talked about was certainly one of the environments where I'd never felt very valued or respected. And it was, you know, I survived, I did the job and I tried to protect the team that I was leading, but it was every opportunity trying to looking for that exit ramp, right? And
Mhm.
trying to find that way out, for looking for that green grass on the other side, or whatever that expression is, versus working for, I think about my best boss that I ever worked for, who truly was a servant leader, who really cared about me as an, not just in my job and my success as a leader, but me as a human being and outside of work. And I remember when my dad got really sick and he was rushed to the ICU, we were in the midst of a huge rollout that I was responsible for. I had to do like all of these training webinars, and I was the only one that knew this new process. And without hesitation, she sent me to be with my dad and said, we'll figure this out. Don't worry about a thing. And it's something that I'll never forget, because it was like a master class in servant leadership. And I reflect back and I think about, how did I perform under her versus this other leader? I wanted to give my all every day to this person. I would have followed her anywhere. And I did. I worked extra hard, and I was just so much more engaged when I felt valued as a human being and as a leader in that organization.
Yeah, that's a brilliant example. And when it didn't work, I'm just curious, under the hood, right? There's a narrative, there's a story we tell ourselves about our value in the organization, and there's an emotion that's anchored with that. I'm
Yeah.
curious, what was the experience like on an emotional, physiological level, that when you worked at the place where the individual was just driving forward and
Yeah.
it wasn't a fit for you? What was that experience?
So what's funny is I got promoted at that job by the owners of the hotel. Actually, that's where I got my first GM job. So they sent me away to Connecticut. I got my first, it was a Holiday Inn full service hotel right by Yale University. And I was like free. I felt like the flying monkeys when the witch was melted, right? So I got
No.
away from this GM. And 3 months later, he was promoted and he became my boss again. And like, again, I just felt physically ill knowing that I was going to be under the person's leadership again. And he would come and visit my hotel once a month. And every time he came, to your point, the story that I would tell myself every month was, oh boy, here we go again. I'm going to get screamed at, because he would come and he would just find all the negative things, right? Never would point out the positive, would just point out the negative. And it was always done in a tone that was very, very forced and very negative, and veins would pop and spit would come out. And so the story I would tell myself was just, it was very negative, and that
Mhm.
would create those feelings of anxiety and stress, and I would physically feel ill knowing that at the end of the month I was going to have this visit. And
Mm.
again, so that lasted about a year, and then I made the exit. And
I imagine from his perspective, everybody he went to talk to was out of sorts. What was wrong with these people? And how
yeah,
hard it is for us to see ourselves. That for me is the $1,000,000 work, right? To help people learn how to understand that they are the problem.
mm,
And the good news is they're the solution.
true.
Now, if you could go back to that individual, what would you tell them? How would you help them gain that kind of awareness and the power of serving as opposed to the approach he had?
I think knowing what I know now, oh my goodness, I think I could have an impact because it all goes to the results, right? If I can speak the language of a businessman who is really focused on bottom line results, results come from people. And we look at, I've yet to meet an executive that doesn't understand the correlation between the more that your employees are engaged, the better your results are going to be on the back end, right? Gallup continues to measure this annually. We're still at 31% engagement in this country. And we spend about $200 billion a year trying to fix it every year. And it doesn't move because we try to fix it with programs, right? We measure it, we go, oh, well, what's wrong? And we need better communication. We need better recognition. We need better leadership. So we just buy leadership programs, or we buy recognition programs. But people don't respond to programs, right? People respond to that environment. They respond to the leader that they work with every day, like we talked about. And so I think if I could talk business sense to say, if you just take care of your people and create an environment where people don't feel sick coming into work, where they feel like they can be themselves and they can be free and comfortable, and right, it improves everything, especially in the world of hospitality when you're trying to serve customers, right? Customer
Mhm.
experience is a direct reflection of the employee experience. So if you have happy employees, that experience translates into the customer experience, and that obviously translates right into your business results. So yeah, I would love to have a time machine and go back and have a great conversation
Isn't
with
that
that one.
now? How do you help? I mean, someone like this already knows the right way to go. They know the answer, and a lot of my experience is a lot of business, especially founders. I think of it as founder syndrome. They, through their own hard work and grit, got the organization where it is, and they know the way. And when their cup is full, you can't put any more in it. So they don't really receive feedback effectively. How do you help individuals who know they're right and don't aren't really open to feedback?
That's why I appeal to the common sense, because what we talk about is so common sense. Sometimes they just need to step away for a moment to look at it from a different perspective. We we do a workshop, for example. I call it the Ebenezer Scrooge experience, where right, you think about Ebenezer Scrooge, and he had that one night where he got visited by his three ghosts, and he woke up and he realized, I need to be a different person, right? And so we
Mm,
do that. We bring people back to their past, and we make them think about and relive these experiences that they had with great leaders and horrible leaders that they worked under, to just relive that experience. And then we bring them to present day, and we talk about what are they people living through today? Because today's very different than even a decade ago. And we talk
mhm.
about things like AI and the stress that that's bringing, and people questioning whether their job is even going to exist tomorrow because of all this new technology. And how do we lead people through that kind of change? And how do we leverage AI to get time that we could reclaim and invest it back into our people so that we can create a healthier, more sustainable type culture? And then we force people to go into the future, and we force people to think about their legacy, and we force them to think about, right? Because time is so finite. At the end of this, when you're at your retirement party, what do you want people to say about you? Like, what impact did you have on the people that you led? You want to
Mhm.
talk about spreadsheets and reports and bottom lines, or do you want to have a true impact on people? And typically, that kind of experience is enough of a reset to get people to wake up and recognize they need to lead differently. And the good news is, it doesn't cost money to create this kind of environment where people, I've heard it too many times where employees say, we don't want another pizza party, Scott. We just want to feel seen and we want to feel valued and respected. That's it. Right. And anybody can do that. We just have to change perspective, change their heart. And then it's intentional work day that it's not easy, but if we can focus on it every day, it's incredibly powerful. And again, it doesn't cost a penny.
It's interesting. You said we just have to change perspective and change their heart. And that seems like a pretty tall order.
It is. Yeah.
Not just, no, I'm curious, my experience is leadership is not separate from personality. And so much of the work is being able to understand what those natural drives are. And when you become intentional as a leader, it impacts every area of your life. And I'd love to hear on your leadership journey, how has it played out personally for you, right? Less theoretical and less about models, but on real boots on the ground, when you really started making these discoveries, how did it impact the way you showed up at home? And how did you evolve and change? And if I were to interview your significant other, what would they say about how your evolution, how it looked in their eyes?
I'll tell you, it has had a profound impact on my life, even outside of my own family, even just in traffic. I have grown so much where I used to not react so well when someone cut me off in traffic. And now I'm constantly reminding myself that I don't know what that person's story is in that car who just cut me off. They could be trying to get to the hospital because their wife is in labor. I don't know. And when I tell myself that, it calms myself down so that I don't react in a way that I'm going to regret. So these things that we're now kind of understanding about, the way that we think and how that translates into our emotions and our behaviors has really helped me personally. But even more importantly than that, I think these lessons I've been able to pass on to my son. And I'll tell you a quick story. We do a lot of work with the homeless here in Orlando. And a couple of Christmases ago, every Christmas Eve, we go out, we deliver presents to the homeless. And a couple of ago, we went out and it's actually a much more beautiful story, but just for time, we had one bag left to give out. And there was this one young lady who was on a bench and she was crying. And we went up to her and we asked her if she wanted this gift and what we were doing there. And she said, "Oh my goodness, do you have shoes in this bag?" Because she'd been praying for shoes all day. And we looked down and she had no shoes on. And it was a cold, kind of drizzly day. And I felt so bad because we had so many things in this bag. We had socks, we had money, we had all kinds of things, but no shoes. And as I was trying to kind of tell her what we did have, I looked over and my son was bending over and taking off his Nike shoes to give to this girl. And it was like the most proud parenting moment of my life. But it was like, that's when I knew, like, mission accomplished. And that's something that I don't know would have happened in my early career days because it was something that I had to evolve and learn myself. And then now that I was able to pass that on to my child.
That's beautiful, right? What a beautiful moment to see the impact you have by just trying to align with your own purpose and vision of what you see as important, how influential that is, not only for the woman on the bench, of course, but for your son.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Now, I'm having this thought. I love the notion of our leadership style. And everybody, when I work with groups, I'll ask people to tell me about their leadership style. And they always have glowing words like servant leadership or conscious leadership or intentional leadership. And they always, give me this great explanation. And then I ask them, well, tell me what happens when things don't go your way. When they're frustrated, irritated, and they begin to behave differently. And they can all recognize that because as humans, we all do it. And it's my observation that that's really the impact of our leadership, not when everything goes right, but when everything goes dead wrong.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage? And I wonder for yourself, because when things go wrong, it's an emotional experience, it's a physiological experience, it's a cognitive experience.
Yeah.
And we're in our prefrontal cortex, our genius brain shuts down, and now we're in this reactive mode.
Yeah.
What's that look like for you? And how have you learned to be aware of that and to begin to manage that in a way that it doesn't spills out less anyway, minimally, right?
Yeah. I'll tell you, I mean, I'm pretty mellow person in general, but I will tell you, just through my leaving operations and getting into training and development and getting certified in a bunch of different programs, one of the programs that I was certified early on in was Crucial Conversations.
Mhm.
And that program taught me a lot about how to handle tough, not just tough conversations, but tough situations like what you're talking about. And so to me, when I'm in those situations, I imagine like taking a paper clip and trying to find my little reset button in the back of my brain and pushing it. And we've already talked about it, but it really is about taking control of your thoughts in that moment. Just like when I'm in traffic, or just like when I'm faced with any moment where I start to feel myself, it's about being aware of what your signals are, right? My ears start to get
Mhm.
hot. I feel my ears getting hot, and I'll start to feel, my heart beating a little bit faster. That's my signal. That's my red flag to say it's starting to happen. Like the Hulk is about to come out. And that's when I know I need to take control of my thoughts and what I'm telling myself in that moment. And if I need to switch
If I
them,
can pause, I want to pause
yeah,
really
go
quick.
ahead.
I
Yeah,
think what you're saying is worth kind of digging into a little bit. So
sure.
you notice there are some real physiological
Physiology. Yeah.
symptoms. Now, when I grew up in GM country in Michigan, where big boys don't cry, never let us see a sweat, right? All of this stuff. So I learned to be unaware. And I'm just curious, how does a person develop the ability to be aware of these kind of symptoms going on within themselves? Because you're saying it's a red flag, and I wholeheartedly
Yeah.
agree. Brilliant. What have you discovered? Like, how do you learn to tune into that and to notice it?
That's why I love leadership development, because I think anybody can learn anything. I don't, I mean, I wouldn't be in this business if I didn't believe that. So even the toughest cookies out there can reflect and recognize, what do you do when you're under pressure, or when you feel threatened, like your idea feels threatened, or something's at risk in your life. What do you do? Do you go more silent and run away from it, or do you become more kind of violent, and do you try to fight it? And then what does that feel like to you? Because we all respond differently, right? Some people, again, they'll go flush, or they'll start to shake, or they'll clench their fist, or they're right. It's all just about reflecting and taking a moment to look in the mirror and think about, oh, I wonder, what do I do when that happens? And then if you can identify that, next time it happens, you go, oh, it's happening, right? You start to be more aware of it. Just like when
Mhm.
coaching speakers about the ums, right? If you are aware of it, then you start to hear them more. But you have to take the time to step back from the whirlwind of your crazy day and take some time and work on yourself. If you're not if you're not going to do that, then it is a bit hard. But I believe, again, if you want to improve, take the time and invest in yourself.
Yeah, I think that's well said. My experience is the organizations only grow as much as the individuals within it.
Mhm.
And when your organization is topping out or hitting a ceiling or having or stalling its revenue growth, well, so many times I've been pulled in by the executive, the CEO, wanting me to work with the staff. And well, the first step is to look at
Yeah.
your own cognitive framework and your own biases, and to see the way you're showing up. And I love that sense you're talking about, a presence and awareness as a foundation to be intentional. That's just
And can I
outstanding.
add one more thing? Because
Yeah.
there is a misperception too about when I talk about servant leadership, that like you have to be this warm and fuzzy person. It's not that, right? I want people to understand that you can be a strategic leader, or you can be a leader that's more action oriented and still be a servant leader. All it is about recognizing that your success is going to come through your people. And if you can look in the mirror and say, you know what, my job today is to go in and make sure that my people, that there's no barriers getting in their way to get their work done today, and that I know what the reality is of their work environment, that they've got the tools to do their job, that that's what servant leadership is. You don't have to be all warm and fuzzy in the cheerleader type. In fact, we do an assessment to help. We have like 7 different archetypes of servant leadership that you can fall into. So anybody can be a people centered leader. And that's just one of the misperceptions that I hear a lot. It's like, I'm not warm
Mm,
and fuzzy, I can't do this. Yes, you can.
mm. Outstanding, outstanding. Well, so what would you leave the audience with if they were to do one thing from where they are? What is one step individuals could take on their path right now, easy, simple, immediate, to help them become more impactful and effective as a leader?
Now, a simple exercise is to just pause and reflect every time you see an employee coming into your office or towards you, and reflect on what label are you putting on that person. Because again, that label, whether that's the problem child, that's the chatty Cathy, and it really works even like, oh, here comes the executive, and you start to get nervous. It's because that label that you've just put on that person, you've elevated them in their worth, right? Stop and reflect on what label you're putting on that person and replace it, and recognize that every person is truly a priceless human being, and see what that does with the way and how you approach and respond to that person. Because again, the way you respond and treat people is the way that you make them feel, and it also is what they start to believe about themselves. And I want people to believe that they are priceless human beings, worthy of our respect and dignity and our time. And again, that's to me the best way to create a very healthy culture where you can stay in business for decades to come. I mean, truly, I think the future of work is not less human. I truly believe it is going to be more human, and that excites me.
Oh, fantastic. So, Scott, how can people get in touch with you or learn more?
Yeah, visit our at.com. We've got all of our information right there. They can get in contact with me, learn about our workshop, or all of our resources.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, thank you. This is a wonderful conversation. I feel like we're aligned in a lot of deep and meaningful ways. The final words as we go out. Any last word or last thought to say to our audience?
I would just tell you all that every interaction truly matters, as every conversation really does matter. Every person in your organization matters, and every person is truly priceless.
Every person is priceless. That's fantastic. And just a reminder, folks, that through May's leadership, lead yourself first. If you haven't got a copy, grab a copy, go to upgradeyourleadership.com, get the free workbook, and continue to lead at the highest level possible. For now, this is Dr. Kevin. I look forward to talking to you next time. Be well.
Thanks for joining us on today's Leadership Upgrade podcast. Now, if you want to continue to challenge your ideas about leadership while increasing your influence, make sure to subscribe to the channel and share this episode with someone you know who wants to become a more inspired executive. If you're ready to take the next major step in upgrading your leadership, don't forget to grab a copy of Lead Yourself First, the High Achiever's Guide to Upgrade Your Leadership, available now. Just go to Upgrade Your Leadership now to secure your copy of the book, and we have additional resources available for those who are truly committed to becoming better. So download the workbook, get the book, and put yourself on a path to become the best version of yourself as a leader. Remember, before you can truly lead others, you must first learn to lead yourself. See you on the next episode. For now, this is Dr. Kevin wishing you well.